For me, leadership isn't about being loud. It's not about being like power. It's not about hierarchical. It's about being grounded, about being inclusive, and above all, to be intentional. It's about embracing uncertainty, and it's about creating space for others to also step in and lead as well. It's really important for everyone to understand that whoever you are, whatever you do, wherever you come from, whatever your background might be, you are always an addition to any team. Any team needs to be made up out of a bunch of different personalities. We need the loud ones, we need the quiet ones, we need the ones who think first and do, and we need the ones who do first and then think. We need to understand the people, we need to understand what motivates people, why they do what they do, and basically translate and explain the exact data.
Welcome to the Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science Seminar Series. This seminar is in English with interpretation available in Spanish, French, and Hindi. You may select the language of your preference at the Zoom bar menu. We invite you to follow us in LinkedIn, YouTube, and social media using the hashtag Women Science for the Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science Seminar Series. We will be hearing today from a leader in communication from development, Manon Koningstein, a communication for development specialist and founder of Sivin Communication. Manon Koningstein will have a conversation with Jerry Caranja, associate scientist at CIMIT as an agricultural nitrogen cycling specialist, and Jerry obtained her PhD in soil science where her research focused on soil fertility and greenhouse gas emissions. We invite you to submit your questions and comments on a slide or two to be addressed in the Q&A session right after the conversation. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Brian Gobarts, Director General of CIMIT, to officially open the event and introduce our distinguished speaker, Manon Koningstein. Dr. Gobarts, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome once again to our webinar, Catalyst of Change, Women Leaders in Science. At CIMIT, we launched a TED Talk meets fireside chat style series on women leaders because we want more women leaders in science institutions like our own. To achieve this goal of a broader representation and gender balance in science, we need to provide more opportunities to hear from women leaders about their life journeys, their lessons, and insights. And we have catalysts of change that highlight women who are leaders in all sorts of capacities, in different fields, at their community, at their home, at the global stage, in different disciplines, in different specialities. Because we believe that leadership styles can take many different forms. And as you well know, you can't be what you can't see. Therefore, today, we have a true catalyst change. Manon Koningstein is Communication for Development Specialist and a founder of Sivin Communications. Manon has over 12 years of experience working in the communications sector with a strong focus on climate change, food security, agriculture, and gender inclusion. She began her career actually at our sister center, the CIAT, and since 2016 is now working as a freelancer and consultant with international resource organizations, NGOs, and government agencies. In 2016, Manon founded Sivin Communications as a creative agency from her passion for transforming research insights and narrative experiences. Sivin develops actually engaging, accessible, and impactful communication strategies using visual storytelling and digital tools. Manon Koningstein will have a conversation with our own Njeri Caranja, associate scientist at CIMIT as an agricultural nitrogen cycling specialist. Njeri began her career with a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the University of Nairobi, Kenya, and a Master's in Agricultural Resource Management from the University of Bonn, Germany. Njeri obtained her PhD in soil science from Kenyatta University, where her research focused on soil fertility and greenhouse gas emissions was well accepted. Her interest in this field emerged from the recognition that agriculture is not only affected by climate change, also plays a significant role in actually resolving it. Before joining CIMIT in May 2024, she spent 10 years as a lecturer at the School of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at that same Kenyatta University. I'm therefore sure that you will enjoy this conversation and especially learn a lot from Manon's outstanding leadership experience. Therefore, without further ado, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, our catalyst of change of today. Welcome, Manon. Please go ahead.
Wow, that is such a nice welcome, such a nice introduction as well. First of all, thank you so much for the entire CIMIT team for inviting me today. I'm really excited to speak and having this conversation with you and Jerry. So I will start off with giving a brief presentation and just a little bit of an overview of where it started, what happened in the middle, and where I am now. And actually the brief overview that Bram gave already said it. Like, I started my career at CIAT, but before that, I think the kind of key thing that happened and that really made me be where I am right now is realizing that where I first thought that communications is the final step, like it's what happens when all the real work is done, when all the research work is done, and then, you know, at the final end, there's communications. But I realized communications is the work. It's also the real work. It's basically what happens when research like moves from a PDF to an actual policy. It's what happens when community knowledge moves from informal to influential. It's what happens when people move from indifference to actual action. So I think this realization really has been key in deciding where I wanted my career to go to. But first, let's start off where it all started. And it's actually really funny because about a year and a half ago, I went to my parents' basement. I grew up in the Netherlands, by the way. I went to my parents' basement and I opened a box. I just become a mom myself. And all of a sudden, I wanted to get in touch with my childhood. So I opened this box where my mother had saved like all the things from my childhood. And I found my absolute favorite book when I was a child. And I had actually completely forgotten about that book. But it was a book from UNICEF. And on every page, it had like stories. Of the different kids from like all kinds of different countries and around the world, right? So on each page, it would have like photos of their favorite food and their friends and family and the houses where they lived and what their school looked like. And I had like stories about what they would do when they woke up and what they would like to do with their little friends. And these were kids of like between 6, 7, and 8 years old, right? And apparently I just read this book over and over and over that basically at this point I couldn't even pick it up without falling apart. So realizing that a year and a half ago, I was like, wow, this interest of mine for like storytelling and like kind of the real stories from the field and different cultures and language, it was in there way before I was even aware of that I was interested in this. So that was actually a really funny realization. But yeah, just kind of moving forward a whole bunch of years. Yeah, like I said, so I grew up in the Netherlands, which maybe in a way is already, I mean, I grew up like about half an hour from the German border and half an hour from the French-Belgium, like from Belgium border where they spoke French. So also like kind of this involvement with different languages and different cultures was kind of part just of my upbringing. Then again, in the Netherlands, it's really hard to be very far away from a border, as you know, like it's one of the smallest countries in the world. So, you know, anyway, so I went to study. I did a high school exchange in the USA after I finished my high school, which I guess was a little bit of like a first like real experience being fully immersed into another culture, into another language, like for a very extended period of time. And after that, I came back to the Netherlands and I studied a Bachelor of International Business Communications. After this, like I did a university exchange with Argentina, where I think we can say that my real passion for the Spanish language was born, and it hasn't gone away ever since. I moved then to a master's in intercultural communication. Went to Ecuador to do another internship with an organization that was working on microloans with rural women. And it's kind of through here that I ended up doing my master thesis in the province of Esmeraldas, which is a coastal province where there is a lot of cacao production. It's kind of like the key area of Ecuador where they produce cacao. And I fully focused on the role of communication for development within the cacao organizations in Esmeraldas. And I think this is like where everything happens afterwards. You know how they say you have these kind of like pivotal moments in your life where when you look back, you're like, okay, well, this little decision happened and then the rest of my career just went on like that. So I think this one was definitely one of those moments, because it's the first kind of connection that I had with communication for development. It was the first connection that I had with using it in an agricultural research for development setting. And it's also through here that I came in touch with CIAT, the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, indeed, as Bram said, like the CIMIT sister organization in Cali, in Colombia, where I then stayed. I started in January 2013, and I stayed for 3 years working as a communication specialist with the gender and climate change research team. And like those 3 years were so impactful in that sense. Like all of a sudden, I was just working together with these amazing researchers with a whole bunch of experience and knowledge. And I remember just the first, well, I want to say weeks, but I guess it was like the first 2 years, really. I was just so impressed by how smart everyone was. I remember saying at my friends, it's like, oh, but you know, everyone just here is like gone to Harvard or whatever. They're all so smart. I don't know. I don't think I fit here. I'm not as smart as everyone else. But then, and I will definitely get back to this later, but I think this is also where I start realizing like, hey, but we all have our own way of being smart and like our own assets that we can bring to every team, right? But anyway, so it was here in those 3 years also that I got a lot of chances to explore like different kind of communications and research. I quite quickly started to notice, for example, that there was a little bit of a gap between like the amazing research that was being done and like the reports, for example, that came out of it. And that same information really getting to like where it needed to go to, sometimes because the language used just wasn't entirely like connecting or understandable for example, farmer organizations. In other ways, it just wasn't like entirely like using the correct channel or the correct formats. And it made me like sad in a way, because it was like there's so much information here that just sometimes stays. So I started experimenting, also proposing. I have to say I also insisted quite a lot. For example, with the first tool, which was called the participatory video. I can tell, like, I can give a whole other hour of presentation about what participatory video is and it can do. I won't bore you with that. But let's say that it's like it's a participatory tool in which you, well, obviously use video. And you work very closely together with the community, and it's a way of storytelling done by the people itself, where you just like remain very closely to the actual story. Well, you might imagine there's this what was I, a 26-year-old girl at CIAT, then like goes up to the like male researchers and says, so here, I have an idea. How about you spend a whole lot of time and with a very small group, and we go make participatory videos. Of course, it took me a little bit of time and a whole bunch of quite like formal proposals to see if I could get anyone on board who wanted to try this out with me. And it took me a year and a half, but I did. I managed to get a project from Human Tropics, actually, at that point, to try out the tool of participatory video together with me. And later on, like there was another CCAS project who wanted to try out a project on participatory photography together with me. And I think, look, that just really also changed my mind and thought, wow, I see so much potential in these kinds of like storytelling approaches being used in research for development, agricultural research. That in March of 2016, I decided to take a step back from CIAT as being a full-time employee, and I started going freelance. So it's also at this point that I have started the organization called Sivin Communications. So it's an agency, if you want to call it that way, which is very much at the intersection of indeed like creativity, development, and participatory approaches as much as possible. And it really just for me, like I realized that what I wanted to be really, what I wanted to add basically to the field of communications and of research, is that I did not only want to be like a translator of like jargon, so to say. I like really wanted to be a connector. I wanted to help researchers like understand how to make their stories more understandable, more relatable, more inclusive also, and how to explain like that complexness that comes together with research, right? I also have to say that living in Latin America for almost 9 years, as I'm sure like many of you will know, definitely sparks your creativity as well. I mean, I think for me, the Latinos are the best in finding all kinds of very creative and innovative solutions to problems that you know they're willing to solve. So I think like just the very fact of living in Latin America also just kind of added to that desire and thinking like, okay, but sometimes we just need to think out of the box and finding like creative solutions, right? Accepting the help of other people. So I started in 2016, so March of 2016. So it's been over 9 years now of being a freelancer and working with Sivin Communications. And over the 9 years, I've been really lucky to have worked with some amazing organizations, some amazing people. Definitely haven't lost my connection with the CGIAR. I've got to work with the C4, for example, with ICRAF, or the World Agroforestry Center, with ILRI. We've created one of the first 360-degree videos together with ILRI, which is a really nice experience. I worked together with the International Water Management Institute, but also like with other NGOs, organizations such as Crop Trust, UNICEF, the Rainforest Alliance. In some projects, I've worked by myself. In some other projects, I have had to contract like external contractors. For example, we've created a community of practice in which I worked with an external contractor to help me with the actual coding. I have worked together with external illustrators because honestly, I know my limits in illustrations, and my limits is when it goes more than just like a stick figure, then I'm out. So very quickly, I had to find very good illustrators. And yeah, like the type of things that we do nowadays, it's very much it's a pretty wide area, I have to say. And I think also probably as a freelancer, I've learned to not be too scared. So when people ask me like, hey, have you ever done this, or are you willing to do this? For example, for ILRI, for the International Livestock Research Institute, what I just said before, like together with them, we made the 360-degree video. I honestly, at that point, I'd never worked with a 360-degree video before. But just getting the questions like, hey, are you willing to try this out with me? I think like being a freelancer, I very quickly have learned to say, sure, like let's try it out, as long as I'm honest before and say like, okay, I don't have that much experience, but I'm very willing to learn as fast as possible. That really opens doors as well. I think this honesty is quite often appreciated. So like I said, like ever since we've worked a lot on a whole bunch of different products, going from infographics to animated videos to photo stories, to obviously like the storytelling and also in the way of participatory video, participatory photography. But one thing has always been very clear in whatever it is that I do, and I always try to still be like as inclusive as possible. So in whatever kind of product that I do, I tend to like look at the language being used. I tend to look at the designs being used. For example, make sure that I'm not using any very male specific words, or trying to make sure that if I create a graphic design, that it's available also for those who have, for example, like are visually impaired and are using like some kind of visual aid for their reading. I always try to give these kind of advices also to the people that I work with, like, hey, just take into account that this might like restrict someone, or you might like unwantingly, of course, like offend someone, right? So yeah, so that's a little bit my my background, where I come from, where I am right now, and I am very sure that Jerry will have a lot of very good questions for me, and in this way, like we'll continue the conversations. I'm not sure if I should give back the word to Isabel or to Jerry. There we go.
Hi, Manon. Thanks once more. And thank you for taking us through the continents. You've taken us to Latin America. I found myself lost there at Ecuador. And now that Isabel, I think I can just go on. My name is Njeri Karanja, and a woman in agriculture and development. And I'm interested in interviewing you and discussing this with you. First, because I'm not as good a communicator like you, so I might be catalyzed to be a communicator just this morning. So I do have a series of things that I would like to follow up with. All right, I thought there was something happening. So Manon, you've taken us through your journey in communication and picking on agriculture where the heart matters. And so I'm looking at it like we have one of the major challenges in communicating impact for agriculture is communication, because there's no direct path between research outcome and the final consumers, like you have said. So what have you learned as a best practice to showcase that first reachers is indeed the main driver in any type of change? And in your opinion, can organizations like CIMIT expand their communication to the final users?
Wow, that's definitely a very good question, and I definitely agree. Like I think research for development in general, it's definitely very non-linear. It's also very it's a very long process. Like as often, like for you to be able to prove and therefore potentially improve impacts. Like it's not something that happens overnight. And in that sense, it's also indeed like a very complex thing to communicate, also because there's so many actors, so many contextual factors, and so many external influences, I would say, that play along with this. However, I think there's definitely things you can do. Like again, like I said, like it's a very long process, but that doesn't mean that like along that process there's a lot of different like impact points already, which you can start showing, like where you can start communicating on. For example, like I would suggest to use a lot of case studies, to use a lot of personal stories. And I think this also relates to your second part of the question, where like how can you link this better to like the final users? If you involve, for example, the final users already, like all the way through the process, so like kind of walk alongside them as they walk towards like the impact, right? Like walk alongside them as they start to understand a new practice or a new innovation, understand their doubts, understand their like the different steps that they go through, and communicate this as well. Like I said, like if you use like personal stories, it's also very strong, and it really allows you to like it allows your audience also to engage with these different steps. I Another thing that you can do, I'm thinking of right now, is that you can use some kind of like a data visualization. For example, quite often used are like infographics, for example. I know also at CIMED I've seen some really nice examples in which you can like kind of visualize these different like steps also along the way. For example, you can show like the bigger umbrella, if you want to call it like that, and visualize through like infographic steps, like where are we now, what are the different things that have already happened, right? You can also share information about where you hope that it's going to. Like it doesn't mean that that's actually what's going to happen, but obviously like when you start with something, like you have a certain visualization of where you want to go to. Nowadays most projects also right at the beginning, they will start with a theory of change, right? So you're pretty much aware of what you hope your final change will be, and you can also visualize this along the way. So like I said, like it doesn't, like you don't have to wait, and I think this very much also links to my thought that I started off my presentation with. Like you don't have to wait until all the work is done, until the research is done, to start communicating. Like you should start communicating right from the beginning, and also like see that as a step of impact, basically. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure.
More or
Those are
less?
good. Those are good insights, because in most cases we wait until we have the food already in the plate before we distribute.
Oh, I like that. Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, because we feel like we're not allowed to communicate unless we feel like we have something to communicate about. And what we feel is worth communicating is when we have something real, like, this is where it started and this we are now, and like we made it or we didn't make it. But there's, like I said, like there's so many steps in between which are completely worth communicating as well.
well, that is so interesting. So you created your, I call it institution or organization, in a platform that also accommodates digitalization. So in this era of digitalization, anyone can post anything and claim like it's credible. And then those who are using it may be misled because they don't know how credible that information is. Like, so do you sometimes use this misleading information to structure your own kind of communication that you want to create? And how do you know that you have actually made a difference?
Mm. Yeah, that's also, I think this is definitely a problem that we're facing a lot these days. There is information at our fingertips ready for us. You just type in anything in Google or ChatGPT, and like you get the answer right there. And I think this is also the risk, right? Because quite often we don't know if it's real. We don't know. There's no way to actually verify it, or like we don't take the time really to verify it. And I think again, like there's a big opportunity for real stories. Like if my story comes from an actual person, like, and I use quotes or I use video or I use like participatory video from a farmer community, it's real. Like it's real because it is actually like from this person, right? So I think like maybe in a way, like the more digitalization, the more artificial intelligence takes over, maybe the stronger are our actual words, because that's their real experience. It's not like AI who made that up. So I think that on the one hand. On the other hand, how do I verify like whether the information that I use is correct? I mean, for me, like any information that I would use, like I would never ask. But that's mostly because I think at this point, like we're still in the footsteps, right, of artificial intelligence, for example, and there's still quite some mistakes that are in there. So at this point, I don't ask like AI to create something from scratch, so to say. Like the way that I would use it for, and which I think is also very helpful, is to create like summaries. For example, like if I'm being asked to create an infographic of a report of like 500 pages, I might ask like artificial intelligence to help me a little bit like summarize this, after which then I obviously like distract and create like my own infographic. So I'm trying to use it like in ways that I feel I can trust it better. Like I said, like at this point, I know like give it another 5-10 years, and like the technology goes so fast, I'm sure like these bugs will start like solving itself, and which means that also like we have to continue to be very reflective about the way that we use it, because the practices that I'm using around like anything digitalized today might be very different than the practices I should use like in a year from now, because everything changes so fast. And yeah, I think like most important, it's just to again like keep verifying, like keep cross-checking any information that you might get. So try to use different sources, try to, if there is a possibility, to verify it with real people, or at least like add to it by real people. I think that's very, very valid and very valuable.
All right, thank you for taking us through that. And I still would like to ask you a very general question. Like, there are these people, especially women, who are leading from the back. Like, they don't have official leadership positions, but they have a lot of power hidden within them. So how best can they be utilized so that this power is packed within the organization and useful?
Oh, that's a good question. And I'm definitely sure there is so much hidden potential that that we're not aware of. And I think also, I mean, we as women, like we're so much more influential, I think also, that we are aware of, right? I once read that like on average, every day you inspire someone, whether you're aware of it or not. And most of the times you're not aware of it unless someone actually like very specifically calls you out and be like, wow, you're just such an example, you're such an inspiration to me. And like this can be like on the work front, or it can also like a lot of times like be on a non-work front. But yeah, like as an organization, I think for organizations to use also and to like make public all of this potential that they have. I think it's all about creating different spaces. So I'm thinking of like examples that I've seen also working with CIAT, for example, or with any of the other CGIAR institutions. For example, like I remember at CIAT there was the time in which like every Wednesday morning there was a space in which anyone from the organization could claim an hour to present on something, like on ideally not their pet dog, but ideally like about something work related, obviously. And people could then like sign up for to join this this presentation. It was at this point, so this is 2000, between 2013 2016, so it was mostly like physical presence. But like by doing so, you give already a space and the floor and the spotlight to those who are like less heard, and yeah, you give them the chance to also explain and show what potential they have, and you allow then the audience to also be like, oh wow, I had no idea that this person like knows all about all of this, right? I think mentorship programs are also very useful. Kind of connecting like a more it doesn't even have to be a junior person, like you said, like we have different personalities, right? Like not everyone is just jumping up at the opportunity to speak in public, and that's really, really fine. I think a good leader also notices, like a good team leader knows that this person is there and like prefers to not speak up in public, and would then, for example, like suggest some kind of mentorship program in which like she would get linked to someone a bit more senior, like take her through and just help her to communicate also like her potential without, you know, grabbing that time slot for an hour presentation, for example, on Wednesday morning, because not everyone might actually feel comfortable doing so. Yeah, I think also maybe in like, again, like not everyone might actually like this, but in more team meetings, for example, just like very actively ask these women, like, so I know you have a lot of experience in this, Jerry, like how do you feel about this? Like, whereas maybe you yourself, you would have never spoken up. So again, like I think a big role is also like in a team leaders. That said, as I say this, I think probably as an organization, it's also good to like train your team leaders, train your management team, for example, so and like how they should go about and like create these spaces, right, for everyone, and how they can like support all of the potential that's in there, not only the ones that scream loudest, but also the ones that have like that are like a potential in the backseat, so to say.
All right, I think I could ask you more and more questions, but I have two questions to ask you. So this one I'll ask you, it's more personal, so take less than a minute to answer this. In most cases, when I'm a CEO of a company or it is my own business, I want to spend all the time there, like checking, is everything going on? Is everything working? So tell me, how, as a business owner, would you take a 4 months leave for maternity and you're not bothered? That is so inspiring, like taking off from your own work for your own good, for your own family. How was that? Did you pop into the office once in a while to see, or it was a full maternity leave?
Yeah, it's actually a really funny question. Beforehand, so indeed, like I worked up until 2 weeks before my due date. And I remember being like, I don't think I can stay away entirely. Like I really think I will just check in my email once in a while. And this is what I thought. But then I have to say, like, having a newborn and my brain was absolutely not there. So in the end, it's true that I managed to, the 10 weeks after and in the end, like 3 weeks before. So indeed, like over 3 months, I did not check in with my email. And I completely trusted that those who took over from me would do a good job. And coming back after, Yeah, they did. I mean, absolutely things. There were definitely things that I would have done differently. I'm not saying better. I'm also not saying worse. I'm saying just differently. And it really showed to me, I think this was a very good point. Like, it really showed to me, like, no one is completely like unmissable. I mean, the world doesn't stop turning if I'm not there. It just continues, and trust people. Everyone knows what they're doing. Trust people that, again, like, even though they do it differently, it doesn't mean that it's not done right. And I think this, like, since has just made me a lot more relaxed still. Be like, okay, well, it's fine. Like, you can take 2 weeks off, and things will just go. And and I also, like, obviously had like an out of office replying, stating the reason why I wasn't answering to my emails. And yeah, I think it's a very pretty valid reason. So there was absolutely no problem with that either.
All right. I asked you the question because I wanted to confirm my thoughts that
Mhm.
that is truly a leadership kit that we may have to embrace because it's so unique in itself. Like, you can trust others can do, yet you know that you are the top leader in that, but you give chance to others to lead and they do better.
Mm.
So finally, what are the key lessons that you have learned as a woman in science, like, through your
Um,
career, both before and after your own organization?
mhm. Yeah, I think something that I already mentioned before, and I was hoping I would get the chance to get back to that. That, like, we are all very unique. We are who we are. And like I said, like in the beginning, working at CIAT and just being around all these amazing people, and as I call them, these amazing brains, I thought, like, I don't belong here. Like, people will see through me. They will understand that I don't have this like brain capacity like they do. And then I started realizing, but okay, wait, maybe I don't know that much about like data science, but maybe I have other things I can bring to the table, right? Like, I know about communications. I know about how to work with women, for example, and I know how to make them feel comfortable and like wanting to tell their story to me. And then I started realizing, like, oh wow, we just all have our own way of being. We have our own working style. We have our own personalities. We have our communication styles, and that is all great. Like, we need all of those. And I think ever since, like, working in teams, and also like whenever I find people to work with me on projects, I try to find this diversity of people. For example, I know of myself, I'm a starter. Like, I have these ideas, and I am able to convince people, and I'm able to tell about it enthusiastically and get started. But once the project goes there, and we get more into the details, and we need to finalize things, and then I need to take like my project and look at it again and improve just something, and then look at it again and improve some tiny things. Like, this is where I'm not so good at this. Like, I lose patience, maybe. I don't know. Like, I sometimes I get sloppy. Like, I know this about myself. So what I need, and I almost always find this in my team, I need someone who's a finisher. Like, I need someone who maybe is a little bit nervous of like starting, but someone who is really good about the details and is really good about like finishing, and like wanting to look again about these like wanting to look again at these little details. And together, like, we make the amazing team. I start and the other one finishes, and that's all we need, right? So I think this really, and again, like, I'm not saying that, like, as women we tend to like camouflage ourselves into what we think other people expect, but maybe as women we have a little bit more the tendency to do so, and less accept like that we're perfect the way we are. So I think this is like one of the main lessons, really something I want to communicate to others as well.
Yeah. My key take home: know yourself. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I hand over to Isabel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jerry, for having this stimulating conversation with Manon Koningstein. Thank you, Jerry. So now we would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. We invite you to raise your hand, to turn on your camera and unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question or comment, or you can submit it via Slido. We have already several questions on Slido, and the first one is, what advice would you give to the Sivin Communications team to support the gender equity and diversity agenda? Are there tactics they can employ in communications material that can help highlight the importance and impact of gender equity work?
Okay, well, good question. Yeah, for sure. Um, so I think one of the key things, although I'm sure like the gender team is very much aware of this, but it already, like, by using specific language, you can make a very big deal. And I have to say, I quite often use a guide created by UNDP, I think it is, and it's like a gender responsible communication guide. So they go very much into depth about like the use of different words to make sure that your language is gender neutral. So instead of like saying craftsmanship, for example, say like artisanal, or you know, kind of like these kinds of words. And then it's also true that like it's really good to research and investigate a bit about like the channels that you use. There's different preferences also for the use of like both social media channels, but also like when you're using offline channels, for example, or you know, I remember we did this research, but this is a while ago, so it's not super valid. But just to give you an example, when radio was still being used quite a lot in indigenous communities in Guatemala, for example, as a way of like presenting, they very specifically chose hours in which they knew like the woman tended to be at home alone. So they were the ones in charge of like choosing like which radio frequency they would use, listen to. And this way they were pretty sure they would actually be able to reach like the women that they wanted, instead of like, you know, having perhaps the male figure in the house like changing the radio frequency and losing out on this. So these are some ways you can do it. Like I said, there's like a lot of research also happening, and this way you can just, yeah, like I said, just define really much what is your audience, then research into like what kind of specific channel you should use, what language you should use, what kind of like visual aspects, for example, you should use.
Thank you very much. We have another question. It says, one of the biggest challenges of communicating impact of agriculture research for development work is that it is most often not a linear path from research outcomes to action on the ground. What have you found are the best ways to show research is indeed important for on-the-ground change?
Yeah, I think this one links a little bit, I think, with when Jerry asked me before, and I think yeah, that it kind of links to what I said before as well. Like, I think it's very good to, like, as we talk about impacts, like it's a very long line, like it's a very long road. To show like the little moments of impact in between, and link it very clearly to like personal stories from the field, like farmer stories, for example. I don't know if you would want me to expand a little bit more on that, or if you think like that the kind of the brief explanation I gave before, do you think that's
Yeah, thank you. That's okay. There is another one. It says, you founded a creative agency with a non-traditional flexible model. What about, what have you learned about leadership outside formal structures? And what can others learn from that experience?
Oh, I love this question. I was also hoping that this one is coming along. Yes, very good detail, which I actually forgot to mention. So since 2016, when I went freelance, I also started working almost entirely remotely. And I'm saying almost because obviously, like when working in the field, there's been some specific field work. But other than that, like for the first 2 years, I worked from Cali, Colombia still, and then I moved to Spain. So like since 2018, I have been living in Spain, which is where I'm registered as well. But honestly, like everything is remotely. There is a pre and post COVID working style though, in which obviously like when COVID-19 happened, all of a sudden so many more structures, first of all, like more structures like fell into place, or like tools that I'd been working with before like now became more accepted. People also like learned how to use it. I mean, I was using Zoom sometimes before, but the way that it's used now with the functionalities that it has now, like it's definitely just taking a big boom, making my life for sure a lot easier. Being entirely remotely and having a team that having team and clients and subcontractors and everything who are all remotely based and working across all kinds of different time zones with all kinds of different communication and language styles, it's a challenge. I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely a challenge. It takes a very clear communication style as well. Like you need to be very clear about expectations, but at the same point, like I'm very flexible, like in when I work or when other people work, which at this point, like it's amazing to me as well. It's also very nice having like a small child. Like sometimes doctor appointments just, they just go in the middle of my working day, and it's really fine because I know in the evening I can catch up. It's okay. Or sometimes I just want to take like a Wednesday or a Tuesday off, and it's fine because then I can catch up in the weekends, for example, like in the weekend evenings. So this kind of like flexible time model also for me, it works really well. It also, of course, means that sometimes the boundary between personal and work is very gray, especially working from home, of course. And I think this is also, I'm not saying it's for everyone, that I have to say, and which is also really okay. Like, I'm not saying it has to be for everyone, because I very much agree that, there's a lot of people who are like, okay, no, work is work, and I close the office door and then I'm home and I'm really home. And I think like working remotely and also working flexibly, it's a lot more difficult. However, like one thing I do think, and this is something I kind of want to give away as well, like something that's very important is that it's really important to have like a way to disconnect, and there's so many different ways to do this. People, I don't know, take a walk in the forest, or like do yoga, or play chess, or paint, or in my case, like I am a big surfer. So once I hit the waves, once I'm out in the ocean, like without any internet connection, obviously, or without anything, like it's really through this like disconnection that I then connect again, because I've had so often that I'm just stuck in something and I just cannot like solve whatever is happening in my brain, and I really, really need to disconnect to then be able to actually solve it and like be able to connect. So of course, like it's your work is really important and a big part of who you are, I guess, is your work, but it's not like what entirely defines you. I think it's really important to keep that in mind at all times as well, and probably even like allows you to do a better job.
Thank you so much. What emotional skills or sensitivities do you think are essential for people working in developing communication, especially when telling difficult or sensitive stories?
That's a very good question. I wish I could say, yeah, for sure, empathy. And I think this is potentially a trait that, like, for women works in our advantage, because like being often considered as like softer or more accessible in this sense. And I've really noticed that like this, I do feel this as an advantage of being a woman. Like I feel more accessible. People tend to trust me more, and like, you know, sit together with me and are willing to share their stories. It's really important to not like entirely let it get to you. And I'm saying this, and I know I definitely fail at that every time still, because I do let it get it to me a little bit too much sometimes. Like stories really affect me still. But yeah, so for that, I think like being obviously like being a good listener, but also knowing at which point you should ask a question. Because at some point, like people are just stuck, or they don't know how to continue with their story. And I think just like a brief guiding question like will just kind of help them along, and it will also show that you're actually like actively listening and understanding like their story. Yeah, in general, like empathy, obviously, just showing that you understand and you're there because you want to learn, right? It's not like you just want to take their story and run off with it. And I think like at any point of any of the work that we do, like we really value like ethical guidelines a lot as well. So we work a lot with like how do you say this? What's probably the easiest word, but I kind of forgot at this point, sorry. But like in which they like literally give their they allow like me to get a summary of their story, or they allow me to use photos of them, etc. So I think this is also very important. Like you need to show them that you understand that they're people also with sensitive stories.
Thank you very much. So we are about to close the session. So what words of wisdom could you share with the audience as our takeaway?
I mean, I know I'm feeling repetitive, but yeah, really. Well, okay, actually, no. Again, stay true to yourself. Well, there we go. I already said this before. And if you're considering like going into communications or starting for yourself, I really recommend to find a niche. Communications is a very big field, and there is a lot going on, and like find your niche and understand that even within communications, you don't have to do everything, right? So for example, I am aware that I am probably world's worst illustrator or drawer you might have ever seen, and that's okay. It took me a while to accept that. I've done all kinds of like drawing courses. I know I'm a lost case. It's okay. Like I don't know how to do this, and that's okay. Or for example, you know, people often assume that communicators are really good in writing, but if you are not a writer but you're an amazing photographer, that is okay. So find your niche. It was a very long word, sorry, but I didn't know how to say this shorter.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Thank you so much. So on behalf of Dr. Brankovic, Director General of CIMIT, we thank you so much for sharing with us your outstanding professional and personal journey. Thank you very much for being a catalyst of change. We also thank the audience that joined today, and we invite you to the following Catalyst of Change Women Leaders in Science seminar. Thank you.
What we work on at the foundation is to educate and advocate for global food security in terms of getting additional funding and support from the U.S. government for activities like international ag research conservation. There are between 700 and 800 million people around the world who are food insecure at any particular day. And we also know that of that number, at least half of them are smallholder farmers. So that means that even though these people are on the land, they do either have enough resources or enough know-how to feed their families year-round. Ag policy is very much an old boys network, and I'm was pretty fortunate to land the position that I did as economist for the Senate Ag Committee staff. Get your way into these old boys networks is difficult, but can be very helpful. I've always wanted to be helpful to the women in this field, so I'm gonna try to help as much as I can.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series.